This is the Armwood Opinion channel here on YouTube, and I'm here today to talk about the Senate impeachment trial that has been going on for the past couple of weeks. And I'm asking a basic question of my viewers. Has this trial been an example of what is called American exceptionalism? Americans love the banty around the phrase of American exceptionalism, that America is somehow superior to other countries in the world because of the way we behave. And my question for you, is this trial an example of American exceptionalism? A trial with no witnesses and no evidence admitted. Now, most of us have had some kind of social studies classes, civics classes. Some of us have even been political science majors or been to law school and even practiced law. Have any of us in the newspapers, in the media, on television, or in radio, ever heard of a trial where there are no witnesses and where there's no evidence? What would we call that? Traditionally, it's called a kangaroo court. Some people use, which I think is a quite offensive term, the type of actions of a banana republic, an insulting phrase used to describe justice in some South American countries that have been under dictatorships. But what we as Americans forget, that this is not an unusual occurrence. What has happened with the Trump impeachment trial, where the Republican Senate, led by Mitch McConnell, Turtle Man himself, has refused to allow any witnesses. They know they're witnesses with pertinent evidence. John Bolton, you couldn't think of a more right-wing conservative than John Bolton, who worked as national security advisor for the administration, has evidence, but they refuse to hear it because they know it would be damaging to Trump. So what do? They refuse to allow any witnesses to testify. Only 2 Republican senators voted to hear evidence, to hear testimony. They were Utah Senator Mitt Romney and Maine Senator Susan Collins. They were the only 2 senators to vote to hear testimony. All of the others, where I live, Georgia's 2 senators, these people are acting like thugs, like gangsters. This is not the way a democracy is supposed to act. But if we look back at American history, unfortunately, this type of behavior is not unusual. This type of undemocratic behavior is not unusual. In my lifetime, we have seen an unjust criminal justice system put kids in jail for having an ounce of marijuana, a virtually harmless drug, especially in comparison to alcohol. But Donald Trump can ask for help from a foreign power on numerous occasions and get away with it and not have any witnesses testify him against him. We've seen segregation in my lifetime. I've experienced it. And we've seen it allowed, and racist courts refuse to convict whites for murdering blacks in this country. This is not unusual. World War II, we saw the U.S. government with the liberal icon Franklin Delano Roosevelt, engaged in the heinous act of putting Japanese American citizens in concentration camps. They called them detention centers, and stealing their property, and the Supreme Court affirming that, and in this so-called democracy. And don't forget, in the last 3 years under the Trump administration, we saw refugees coming across the southern border of the United States from Mexico. A lot of them are from Guatemala and other countries in Central and South America, going through horrible times. A lot of it having to do with American foreign policy in the 80s, being put in cages, literally in cages, people dying. We've seen American Border Patrol people turning over buckets of water left in the desert for these people to drink.
Videos circulating on the internet show U.S. Border Patrol agents destroying water aid stations in the Arizona desert. The water is meant to help immigrants crossing the border who risk dying of thirst on the dangerous journey.
This is Nazi-like behavior. So to see a trial like this trial is not un-American. It's very American. And we can go back and we can look at people like Andrew Johnson, who was president after Lincoln died in the Civil War. He was impeached, and he was allowed to get away with not enforcing the law that protected former slaves from slavery. In fact, America lies and says slavery ended in 1865 with the 13th Amendment. That is a huge lie. I can show you a document put out by the U.S. government, by the Attorney General's office, Circular 3591, which was issued December 7th of 1941, saying that slavery was still going on in 1941. My grandfather, during World War I, was director of Negro labor of the state of Florida, and he fought slavery in Florida during the First World War, which ran from 1914 to 1917. The United States got involved right at the end of 1917. But there was slavery in Florida. There was slavery all over the South. The last prosecution for slavery in the United States happened in 1942. They lie to us. Unless you go on your own and do the research, and it's there. It's not hard to find. But if you believe what America says, you are a fool, because America lies. Let's go back even farther. Andrew Jackson, the guy whose painting Trump put up behind his desk at the White House, he defied the Supreme Court and removed the Cherokee people from their lands in defiance of the Supreme Court, which led to the Trail of Tears, where thousands and thousands of Native Americans died, made to walk from North Georgia and up through North Carolina all the way to Oklahoma, their land stolen without compensation, in violation of the Constitution, and taken out west, given blankets that had disease in them, had smallpox in them, so they would die. This is America. America has murdered Native Americans. America has murdered South Americans. It stole half of the country from Mexico. What Donald Trump and the Republicans are doing are as American as apple pie. America has never been a democracy. You have a state like Wyoming that has 1/60th the population of California and has 2 senators. Is that a democracy? No. There's no one man, one vote, or one person, one vote as it should be. In the United States, women couldn't vote until, 1920? They had to pass the Voting Rights Act in 1965 to enforce voting for African Americans, and the governor of the state of Georgia is still trying to disenfranchise African Americans. This is the American way. What Donald Trump has done and the Republicans have done in acquitting this criminal, this gangster, is the American way. The Trumps, the Mitch McConnells, Turtle Man himself, are no different than the Columbos, no different than the Gottis. The Republicans are gangsters. And we have to recognize that. Okay. The question, as always, is what do we do about it? We fight it. Obviously, we can't fight it with arms and military. Not that it's not justified, but we can't do it because we cannot win that kind of battle. That is suicide. What we can do is use the power in our hands. We have the power of the vote. Yes, I hear you saying they have asked foreign powers to interfere in the election. The Russians interfered dramatically in 2016. They're going to do it again. Trump wants them to do it. We know this. He asked the Ukrainians to do it. That's what this impeachment was about. But the Republicans are okay with this because they don't believe in democracy. Their supporters don't believe in democracy. People that voted for Trump are thugs. Plain and simple. They're thugs. There's no ethical, moral reason that any decent person would vote for a person who, while running from office, would call people from another country gangsters, criminals, etc., and talk about grabbing women's private parts and vote for him. Decent people don't do that. America has always had people who were not decent. How could it have slavery? How could it have the murder of Indians, the theft, and I mean Native Americans? How could it have the theft of Mexican land if these were good people? No, they're not. They were the garbage of Europe who came to America. Let's face it. They were the garbage of Europe who came to America to settle this country and steal it from the indigenous populations. So we shouldn't be surprised. There's no reason to get angry about it. We know who Americans are. We know what American exceptionalism is. It's a big lie. What we need to do is to use our vote, use our activism to defeat Donald Trump in 2020. Will we defeat him? Maybe, maybe not. Should we get all upset about what happens? No. Remember, we're all going to die one day. We all know this. Some people get around the idea through religion or other means, but we know we're all going to die. So, do we give up? No. We continue to live. We continue to go to the doctors to stretch out our lives as long as possible. We do the best we can, even though we know it's ultimately a losing battle. This battle, we know, is a temporary setback. Trump will not be president forever. Yes, he may try to stay in after his first term if he's defeated, after his second term. We know that. But we know he's 70-some years old. He's not going to last that much longer. So there will be a time after Trump. So we have to look forward to that future. We have to try to hasten that future by not despairing, not giving up, by keeping up the good fight, by resisting. As I always say, resistance is not futile. We have to organize. Now, if you have a Google Assistant at home, ask it if resistance is futile. And what it will tell you is that if Locutus could resist from Star Trek Next Generation. He resisted the Borg. Then you can resist. So resistance is not futile. Hit the like button if you like this video. Please subscribe to the channel. This is once again John Armwood on the Armwood Opinion channel. As I always say, resistance is not futile. We can and will win.